Hi, my name is Becky Palmer. I'm a health and relationship coach with Brilliance Health Coaching. Thank you so much for being interested in this topic of coping with fear in these uncertain, unknown times that we're all sharing together. The thing is that we are all in this together as a global species, as a human species. And so having the skills, the resiliency, the capabilities, the competence to move through these fears, through these uncertain times, and really embrace the challenge that is upon us is going to take leadership skills. It's going to take some healing of stress, of trauma, of some of the darker aspects of the human spirit, of really addressing those things and taking a peek inside of them and integrating them from a psychology perspective. So my name is Becky Palmer. I'm a pharmacist. I'm a retired military officer. I'm also a graduate student in counseling psychology, and I'm a health and relationship coach, business owner, president of a networking marketing group, BNI. I am a jack of all trades in a lot of areas, but ultimately my ultimate passion is within mental health, emotional health, and physical health. And the leadership that it takes internally as individuals to self-govern, but also as a collective, as a species, as a group, as a family. How do we come together in these times and really support both the individual and the collective and the group and the entire globe? So it's my passion to share my knowledge of mental health, of how the psyche operates to the best of our knowledge, how we can operate as a society in that group think, that collective think, and how we can avoid making mistakes that are based out of fear and anxiety, these decisions that we make that are not rooted in intuition or desire or the best well-being for our entire society, but are based in fear and based in reactivity. So that's my goal for this video, for sharing this with you, is to impart what I know about leadership principles, about physical health, about mental health, and about emotional health. So thank you for joining me today. I really hope you get a lot out of this. Managing fear and worry is really about both physical and mental health. And I include in mental health emotional health, but emotional health kind of is a combination between physical and mental health, right? We feel our emotions on the sensation level, but we also think about our emotions. And all three tie in together to be holistic overall well-being and health. So in this time of fear and worry and uncertainty, we do have to focus on both of those things at the individual level, making sure that we're taking care of ourselves on the individual level, and also taking care of each other, right? So that old saying of putting on your own oxygen mask first before you help somebody else that's in need is really true. We do have to look after ourselves and make sure that all of our needs are met, not at the expense of anyone else. That's the difference, right? Not at the expense of anyone else, but in order to be able to come from a place of full and serve and protect and move our society forward, our families forward, keeping us all safe. So having that physical health means getting enough sleep, having a good immune system, making sure you're working on that immune system health, and having that stamina and strength to carry on. Again, to come from a place of full means that you are well looked after, so that when you are called upon to do something in service to your community, that you have that energy and that stamina to do so. You are in good bodily health. So physical health is really important. Mental health is also really important. That mental clarity to be able to find solutions, to minimize anxiety and rumination. And now I know they're both tied together, right? So we have anxiety that affects our sleep. The anxiety also raises cortisol, which affects our immune system and can also deplete our energy. So, working on ways to both support from the physical end of the spectrum and also the mental health end of the spectrum. So, what I call bottom up is the physical, and top down is the mental. And then we meet somewhere in the middle with that holistic health. So, the next thing I want to talk about is what is happening here. Let's really just address what's going on when we're talking about fear and anxiety and rumination and the unknown, uncertainty. Change is a big thing, right? We don't know how to deal with change. And part of things changing out of our control, like they are right now, is that we go through a process of grief. We're grieving who we used to be. We're grieving that maybe we weren't fully appreciative of how things used to be. It's that whole, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, right? Maybe we were just getting through our day to day, and now that things are different, now that we're home more, or we're busy, or we're having to take care of loved ones, or we're healthcare workers on the front lines, whatever it is, things have drastically changed in the last few weeks. So we are all going through a grieving process of things are not the same as they used to be. Now they may go back to normal, but likely there's some changes and shifts that are going to change things forever. That's just the way that the world and the universe and nature works, right? There will be things that settle back down, but there will be certain aspects of this that changes us forever. And we do have to grieve that. We have to acknowledge that our old self is gone. And that doesn't mean that a new self is about to be reborn and it can be better and exciting, and there's a lot of good and positivity that can come out of it. But we do have to still address the fact that things are changing, and then that is sad and that is scary, and that there's an element of regret that can come into that, or just overall just deep those heavier emotions of sadness. And if we can stay present with that grief, if we can be in approval of that grief, then we can move through it and let those emotions, like emotions, they like to be in motion, we can let them move through us. Okay, so being in a stage of grief, totally normal. It would be weird if you weren't. It goes hand in hand with that fear, that anxiety. We're grieving a loss. Initially, we can also be in shock, and that shock and denial kind of can overlap with each other. So shock, not being able to take action, kind of going into paralysis, not being able to move forward, and then also denying that anything is happening at all. And we see that division going on right now, right? Of people wanting to deny that anything is even happening, or that it's that big of a deal. And then we have people that are completely in shock and don't know what to do. And then we have people that are already wanting to take action and take charge and move forward. And so we want to be respectful of the dignity of all of those people, but at the same time help those people that feel like they're stuck. Okay, none of these stages are wrong or bad in any way. They're a normal part of the grief cycle, and you can move in and out of them. You could go from shock straight to depression. You could go from denial to bargaining. You could move in any direction, but just knowing where you are is a really, like, right in this moment, being able to tune into where you are now is really helpful, so that you can be in approval of that and then move on to the next stage, and again know where you are, have some awareness and consciousness around it, so that it doesn't feel quite so scary. That's the one element of control that we do have, right? We do have control over ourselves, and we are responsible for ourselves. So Denial, anger is another big one that can feel really scary. Anger in and of itself is really healthy. Anger, that initial bubbling up of anger, it means something. It means that a boundary is being violated, or that some kind of desire for change is bubbling up within you. Now, when anger is either repressed or suppressed, it rots inside us and turns into either resentment or aggression. And that's kind of like the second stage of anger. And that's why anger gets this reputation as being a cover emotion and not an emotion in and of itself. I think it is an emotion in and of itself. It's just when it's suppressed and it's made to be kept inside, that's when it rots into resentment or into aggression. And those things are not the most useful, or they can become destructive. So we want to be able to deal with our resentment, deal with our aggression. There's ways to do that. There's ways to deal with denial. There's ways to deal with shock. There's ways to deal with the bargaining aspect of seeking for a way out, of wanting to negotiate and have things go back to the way that they were. And that can lead to both anxiety and depression. Depression is that hopelessness feeling, that powerless feeling, right? Of nothing is ever going to change. And that can really become so rooted in your body that it becomes symptomatic and it becomes clinical. So making sure that we're watching ourselves for the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety, not just from the situation, but if it's lasting for longer periods of times and we can't seem to function around it, that's when we know we're getting into those clinical stages. And then we move into acceptance. And again, we can move in and out of acceptance as we go. But even if you can get a minute of acceptance today, that things are changing, that uncertainty may be around for a while, that acceptance of the uncertainty itself, that can, even if it's just a minute today and 2 minutes tomorrow and 3 minutes the next day, that's progress. Okay, so again, it's really just knowing that it's normal to be in these stages and it's okay to be in these stages. We just want to know where we are so that we can deal with our grief, process our grief, and then move into handling our fears as well. So we start with this uncertainty principle, and they say that, I'm not sure who says this, but somebody along the line said that we aren't necessarily afraid of the unknown. We're afraid of leaving what's comfortable. We're afraid of leaving the known. So that means that we don't, because in the known, we know what to do. We don't usually feel overwhelmed. We are able to focus and function, and when uncertainty arrives, all of those things go away. So we don't know what to do. We feel overwhelmed. We have a lack of ability to focus. That's a sign of being in trauma, being triggered. Our sleep sucks. We get into conflict with other people, even with our loved ones, or the conflict escalates, or we have to discharge our emotions, and that leads to conflict with people. And that can all lead to a desperation for things to go back to the way that they were. And this is very much the stage where we're focused on the negative, on the loss, on the survival of the self, of grief. It's very internal. And again, there's nothing wrong with this stage. We just want to be aware that that's where we are so that we can get our needs met in ways that are constructive, and instead of destructively and unconsciously trying to get these needs met in ways that don't serve us in the long run. Okay, and then my goal is for all of us to get to the point where we've accepted that change is happening, has happened, will continue to happen, and to focus on creative solutions. So I have a group that I'm working with. It's called BNI, and we have been proactive in our approach to dealing with these changes. And it does take leadership. It does take the leadership to stay focused, to stay positive, to stay aware that it's easier to look for barriers. It's easier to hold back and not want to change because you like the old way that it was, or you anticipate a lot of growing pains with growing into something new. But if there is a blessing to this, we are being pushed forward in our evolution and we don't have a choice. And so while that's scary to not have a choice, it also can be a blessing in that we have to move forward. We're being pushed to. We have to adapt our systems and our structures and our healthcare system and our political system, our economy. All of those things are at the forefront. Our environments, whether that's cities and our local environments to the entire environment of the planet. All of those things are having to be looked at this time. So we want to focus both on the health of the individual and the help of the group. And all of that has a certain energy quality to it, a dynamic to it that can be learned. And I can teach you how. So it starts with understanding fear itself. So knowing thy enemy is to know thyself, to know that the fear is generated within us. And that is the good and the bad news. We can feel like we are the victims to fear and the victims to our own anxiety, that because it feels like we are not in control of it. And to a certain extent, that may really feel true. And I get that. But what we want to do is, again, address that fear, address that anxiety, address the trauma behind it head on so that we can actually mitigate that fear. We can actually disperse it. And that takes kind of like the light of our consciousness. By looking at it, by addressing it, by becoming aware of our fears, we can dissolve them. It is possible. And I know because I've done it for myself and with countless clients. So types of fears there's two main types of fears. We can distill them down to imminent, like real in our environment fears right now that are right there. Like that tiger is right in front of us. It is going to eat us. That's an imminent threat. Or even I have to deliver this public speech right now. That is imminent. Like I can feel the stress response in my body. My heart is beating faster. I'm sweating. My pupils are dilating. Like everything's happening to go into a kind of crisis mode response or even trauma response. Then there's illusionary fears, which we say like everything happens in our head. It's all in your head, right? And that's not to trivialize it. I think that actually that's a powerful statement because everything does happen in our head. Our perceptions are all filtered through our minds. So everything that happens, whether it's external or internal, is all being filtered by our nervous system and our processes. So it is all in our head, but also it doesn't mean that our body isn't feeling it as real. And that's the thing with illusionary or perception-based fears, that they are very much seen by the body or felt by the body as if they are imminent threats, as if that tiger really is there, as if we really do have to deliver that speech right now. Our body doesn't really know the difference. Now, the range and the grade of severity might be a little bit like less intense, but overall what's happening to the body is that sympathetic nervous system is in overdrive. Even if your foot is just a little bit on the gas, that little bit on the gas over time adds up and leads to chronic issues like anxiety, like autoimmune disorders, like gut issues, immune system issues, all of these chronic issues that can happen are all because of the body perceiving this low grade stress continuously. So Imminent threats we have to deal with imminently, right? We have to deal with them right off the bat. Illusionary threats or fears, we can start to modify in our perception, but we have to be aware of them first. So the hierarchy of fears, this is just to kind of divide and conquer kind of idea of different types of fears. This is based on the chakras. So at the bottom, we have the foundational, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs as well, this is very much related to that. We have these survival fears at the bottom. Who's going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to get food on the table? These are all genuinely real fears. And what I think that we need to do at this point in time, because of the uncertainty, is it really is a day by day kind of issue. That, do I have food on the table? Am I okay? Do I have a shelter? Do I have good people around me? Am I safe? Moment by moment, day by day, am I okay? And how can I plan even for tomorrow, for next week? And then as things start to get a little bit more stable in the future coming up here, then we can start planning long term again. But during this shakeup, we are kind of living day by day. So addressing those survival concerns, really, really important for, again, for ourselves as individuals and also for our families. Again, we don't want to be doing any of this at the expense of anybody else as much as we can. The more we can all treat humanity as a whole organism of itself, if one part suffers, we all suffer, the more we will do better as a whole. We overall got to where we are from an evolutionary point of view because we work together. So we have to be able to continue to work together and continue to support each other, continue to understand how these social dynamics work so that we can keep that cohesion going and for it to be as positive as possible. And I think that is possible where we're at in our evolution and in our awareness. So power is the next step. That's these power dynamics, these power struggles that we get into. Being aware of power struggles, where those come from again, from a psychology point of view, they come from that toddler phase of when we were toddlers fighting over sharing, right? So again, like, is this a toddler fight or is this an adult fight? We really want to be aware of power power struggles in our lives and bringing some awareness on an individual and familial level. Competence and skill. What's your skill set? What do you contribute? What are you good at? Is it nurturing? Is it cooking? Is it gardening? What is it that you do that's unique to you, completely unique to you, that you offer, that we need you to help us with at this time? How can you build that competency? How can you really get into that? And that's where these fears can come up of, well, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm useless. Maybe I don't have value in this world. Maybe you're too young, or you feel like you're too old to contribute. And those things just aren't true. There are special populations that we do need to make sure that we're looking after, but even that is providing purpose for other people. There's always something that you're giving, whether it's that comfort, whether it's having somebody to look after, whether it's that history, that respect for our elders, whatever it is, we all have something that we can give, and we all have a role to play in this. So managing those fears around your identity and around your competence and around your usefulness is going to be really important at this time. Also, fears around connection. Does anybody love me? Am I lovable? Am I going to be looked after? Can I survive in this relationally? That's going to be an important group of fears to address. our fears around expression. Will anybody listen to me if I give my opinion? Am I going to be able to communicate appropriately or effectively? And then at the top is that knowledge. Are we going to know what to do? Are we going to have the insight? Are we going to get ahead of this to be proactive? Or are we going to be caught off guard because we didn't have enough knowledge? All of those fears can be grouped out into all of those different categories. And I think that's important because, again, some of these are perceived fears, which are projected into the future. And some of them are real-time fears, real-time survival fears, real-time, I need to deal with my trauma type of fears, or I need to deal with my communication issues, or I need to deal with fill in the blank type of future fears that I'm anticipating. And they may be grounded in reality, and they may be grounded in trauma. They may be grounded in old patterns or programs that were installed in childhood. So it's really important that we start to parcel out what the difference is so that we can get to the top of that pyramid and have the closest to reality, most practical insight and knowledge that we can in order to move forward. And all of this requires, you're gonna hate me, but it's gonna require being calm, being quiet, relaxing. That's where we need to be in problem solving mode. And there are certain people that make decisions really well under high stress, and those are usually our frontline providers, our first responders. They're trained specifically to train their own bodies to stay calm and quiet and collected so that they can stay in problem solving mode when they're under high stress. That's a special group of people that I'm very thankful exists. But they also show us that it's possible. So for the rest of us that aren't quite as trained and don't have that skill, we do need to start learning it. We need to start developing it. And that means training our bodies to be calm, to be quiet, to go into problem solving mode, to meditate, to relax, to go into the parasympathetic system of our nervous system, which is all about resting, digesting, our immune system. All of that happens when the parasympathetic nervous system is able to switch on, which means that the sympathetic cortisol system has to shut down, or at least go on pause, take that foot off the gas. So there are ways that we can do this, and it does involve getting involved. So for yourself and for groups, again, I want this balance, this consciousness around the balance, that we're looking after ourselves, and we're looking after our families, and we're looking after our communities and our cities. Everybody is included in this. So first for self, again, getting enough sleep. And if you can't sleep, addressing that anxiety with friends, with counselors, with coaches, getting enough vitamin C, so fruits and vegetables or supplements. Meditation is going to come into play here, and getting out into nature, so getting outside as much as you can. I know we have that social distancing going on, but we still can go outside. We're very lucky here in Canada that we have lots of room to roam around in nature, and there are lots of studies that show that nature is very healing for depression, and depression and anxiety are very much overlapped. So getting outside is going to be really important. I know I have to walk my dog, and now I just walk him 3 times a day instead of once or twice. In groups, sharing, appreciating, learning how to focus on the positive is, and we're not, again, I'm not a proponent of covering over the negative and ignoring it. We are still addressing the negativity. We're still incorporating the negativity, but we also, our nervous systems are very trained to look for the negative, and they're not very trained to look for the positive. So that is a muscle that we have to develop, to appreciate each other, to really ground into the present moment and find peace with each other and enjoyment and fulfillment. All of that happens in the present moment. And that appreciation is usually the gateway. that I know that's the best way into that. So again, not this Pollyanna, just focus on the positive and ignore the negative. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying is to make sure that we are spending time practicing that and working out that appreciative muscle, that positivity muscle, and seeing if that helps with the negativity at all. But not to minimize the negative things that are going on either. Problem solving and goal setting, being slightly future oriented as well. But again, like I said, for now, it might have to be day by day. And then as things settle down or become more we get more information, then we may be able to goal set and problem solve from that calm state in a little bit of a better way. So again, meditation, appreciation, and relaxation. I want to talk about leadership principles because, like I said at the beginning, I'm really, really, really passionate about leadership. And I think that leadership takes a lot of emotional intelligence. Leadership is actually service to others. Leadership is not about prestige. It's not about being at the top of the totem pole. It's not about even really having the most power. I think that true leadership is actually a responsibility that is difficult because it means that you are in full service to the people in your team, in your family, in your group. And they're really important to me. So I took these 11 principles from the US Army. I'm not going to talk about all 11 of them, but I'm just going to read them to you quickly here. Knowing yourself and seeking self-improvement is the first leadership principle of the US Army. Being technically proficient in your trade or skill, we talked about that. Seeking responsibility and taking responsibility for your actions, your emotions, your beliefs. Again, that element of responsibility. So while we may be victims to this circumstance, and we are victims to this circumstance, we also can take responsibility for how we perceive it, how we react to it, how we move forward with it. Making sound and timely decisions. This is really important too when it comes to our leaders, our policymakers, our politicians, our planners. They're having to make some decisions that are not based on a lot of information. And at this stage in the game, I would rather take a risk and maybe be wrong about it than do nothing and have the worst case scenario happen. So again, because this change is upon us, we have to be able to accept that things are changing, accept that the transition is going to be shaky, it's not going to be perfect, it's going to be awkward and cumbersome and maybe even a little bit painful, but that's better than staying still at this point, because staying still would just be a fear response. It would just be denial, and it would just be made out of not knowing how to move forward, or being so frozen that we can't, frozen in fear that we can't move forward. So for those of us, there are going to be people like that, and that's okay. That happens. But if enough of us can have these leadership principles and have this courage and have this this drive forward, then hopefully everybody will benefit as a whole. So making sound and timely decisions, setting the example, knowing your team, knowing your family, really being as intimate as possible, which intimacy just means knowing somebody else, seeing somebody else, right? Looking out for the well-being of all, keeping your team informed, your family informed with reason and meaning. People need to know the reason behind why they're doing what they're doing. That's really important. Building team spirit, confidence, and competence, really focusing on people's strengths and what they can deliver, what they are capable of, and not expecting people to do things that are not within their strength set, or they're just, not focusing on weaknesses or deficiencies at this time. That's just not helpful. because we all can work together in order to maximize the potential with the strengths to mitigate the weaknesses that we all have. But being aware of your weaknesses is important too. So again, progress, not perfection. Meditation apps, there's a ton of good meditation apps out there. Really recommend those. Doing self-reflection and inventories again, so we know our strengths, we know our weaknesses, we know where these fears are coming from, we know whether they're projected, if they're imminent threats, or if they're illusionary, based again in old programming. Getting outdoors, like I mentioned, building on that emotional intelligence and communication skills, having empathy for others, that we are very limbically connected to each other. Our brains are very connected. We mirror each other and mirror neurons. And so being able to pick up on those subtleties takes emotional intelligence. And it is, for lack of better terms, of a term, it's energetic. We can feel it. We can feel the changes. We can feel this slight change in body language or tone or posture or whatever it is, so that we have that awareness that something is off or something needs to be addressed, and to meet that in real time in order to move forward with the team building and keeping that morale high. That takes sharing and listening, and especially if you identify as a leader, making sure that you have your support networks and that you're sharing and you're listening and you're talking about that negative stuff too, talking about the positivity, but not just focusing on that, also getting your vents out too, processing that. Making time for humor and for fun. My cousin was just telling me about how she's really using this time to play with her girls and play board games and chase them around the house, and really use this time that she's getting to spend with them to its benefit, using humor and fun and being in the moment. And then overall just working together, I think, is so important. And overall, again, I'll urge this again, if you identify as a leader, if you want to be a part of the positive change that's happening here, the support systems, the building that higher knowledge, making the right decisions, doing the best we can, that progress, then you will need help. You will need a support system. You will need to build your emotional intelligence. You will need to address your fears, your anxieties, your grief, so that you are able to problem solve. So again, my name is Becky Palmer. I'm a health and relationship coach. I coach individuals, I coach couples, I coach groups in the workplace, management teams, leadership teams, and I am here for you. I'm here to help. And I know money is tight for a lot of people right now. And that's why I want to offer a inner stress to inner strength coaching program online. It's going to be offered Mondays at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. So Mondays, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And it'll be an hour of a question and answer. We'll go over some topics. And again, it's going from inner stress to inner strength. And we'll address a lot of the topics that we talked about today. And it is budget conscious. You can come to all of them. You can come to one of them. It's up to you, your time. They are online, so they're convenient for you. But if you only want to pay for one of them, you only have to pay for one. If you want to come to all of them, you just pay for all of them. But that's up to you and your budget. So that's my offer out into help. I want to be able to give my expertise, my experience, my support as best as I can to move forward, to support leaders, to support decision makers. I know that this is tough and we need each other at this point in time. So again, get in touch with me at palmer-coaching.com. You can email me, you can call me. I very much look forward to hearing from you, and I am so happy that you came and joined me on this call and made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much. Blessings, love, good luck. We can do this if we do it together.